Hello, thank you for joining us. My name is Todd Biddle and I'm head counselor at Lincoln High School. Thank you for coming to our college information night. Tonight we will be going through quite a few things. We'll be doing introductions in just a moment, but let's start with our agenda. So first of all, you will meet your counselors. We will talk about post-secondary pathways tonight. We will talk about some planning options, some resources, answer some questions about testing, and then of course, we will answer questions in the Q&A. So as you can see on, hopefully you can see it, there's a place for you to ask questions. Keep your questions appropriate. This is being recorded. We will only publish questions that are relevant to tonight's topic. So I just wanted to be clear about that. Again, my name is Todd Biddle. If your last name starts with the letters A through G, like the requirements to get into the University of California, we'll talk about that later, then I represent your student. Joining us tonight also will be Mr. Malaki. He represents and works with students H to O, and Miss Pakumpara, and I will let them, she works with students P to Z, but I'll let them introduce themselves here in just a moment. One of the things we thought that we would do tonight to get us started is talk a little bit about our own college journeys, just really quickly. So I started my college in Santa Cruz, California at a community college called Cabrillo. From there, I transferred to a small private school in Southern California called La Sierra University. I was actually a biology pre-med major, so I have an undergraduate degree in biology and anthropology. By way of trying out medical school, I ended up back doing my master's in counseling, and here I am. I'm also currently a student at the University of Washington in the leadership program. So I'm getting a little taste of a lot of different types of education there.
Hello, and I'm Anthony Malaki, and I'm a counselor for students with the last names of H through O. And yeah, my college journey started at Washington State University, where I graduated there with my teaching credentials. And after my student teaching experience, I learned very quickly that I wanted to be a school counselor. And shortly after that, I enrolled into the University of Washington into the school counseling program, and that's where I got my master's from.
Hello, I am Miss Pakumpara. Last year I was Miss Shu, you might remember. And I represent students' last names P through Z. And for me, I started at Eastern Washington University for less than a year before I realized it was not a great fit for me personally, and moved to Seattle, where I attended Seattle Central, and almost got my associates. I got really close, and then ended up transferring to the University of Washington, where I got my undergraduate, my bachelor's in sociology and family studies, and then worked for a while and ended up landing on school counseling, where I got my master's in counseling from Seattle University in 2017. And so I've basically moved to Seattle and haven't left. And so I will kick off tonight's presentation with talking about post-secondary pathways. Basically, when we are talking about your options for after high school, we are talking about a lot of different options, and many options can be combined, just like mine was. I went to a four-year school and then a two-year school and then a four-year school again. But that can look really differently depending on who you are and your plans. So it could be a four-year college or university, it could be a community college or a technical college, apprenticeships, military options, gap years, service work, or direct to work. And all of those pathways are available to you and an option. Tonight we'll talk mostly about four-year colleges and preparing for the application process. We'll also talk about some of our local community college options, and we'll touch on gap years. We won't talk much about apprenticeships and military tonight, but we will be able to talk individually with you if you have individual questions about what your options are for those two pathways. So starting us off, there's this lovely infographic that if you registered at Lincoln last year, you saw this in your class, but this is basically a chart of the different various requirements for graduation, but also for post-secondary planning. So as you are preparing for your future, you might want to consider the different things that you might need to think about so that you're keeping as many doors open as possible. So for the high school graduation at Seattle Public Schools, so we're looking at class of 2021, that's this year and beyond, you will need 4 years of English, 3 years of science, 3 years of math, 3 years of social studies, 2 years of fine and performing arts. That's a little bit flexible with personal pathways. World language is also part of that personal pathway combination, but we do recommend that all students take a world language to keep all of your options open for post-secondary planning. A credit and a half of PE, a half a credit of health, 1.0 of career-connected learning, otherwise known as CTE, and 4 credits of electives. And you'll notice that as we move across the chart, we're looking at different institutions and what they might require as well. The CATERs are the Washington State College requirements, and you'll see there a difference in fine and performing arts requirements. They do require world language, and they're not as rigorous with science. They'll have 2. So if you're going to graduate from SPS, you will also qualify with your science credits as far as the credits that you'll take to graduate from high school. Moving over, University of California or the California State University entrance requirements, those are a little bit different. If you look down at the fine and performing arts requirements, they are going to want you to take your credit of art in the same category. So if you take drawing and painting, they're going to want you to take drawing and painting advanced so that you have a full credit in that one content area. They're also going to require world language, and if you look all the way down at the bottom, it says 1.0 college prep elective. What does that mean? That's going to be an elective that might be like your more college prep, so your 4th year of math, your 4th year of science, things that are going to keep that rigor going in your high school career. And then moving over one more column, your highly selective colleges, they are exactly what they call themselves to be, which is highly selective. And those are colleges that might be selective because of their rigorous reputation, but also they could be highly selective because they are smaller schools and have lots of applicants. And so that means that overall the percentage of applicants is going to be fairly small. And you're going to want to keep your academic choices as rigorous as possible for those schools. So you're going to want to do 3 or 4 years of world language. You're going to want to do as many social studies, science, math as possible as well. So those are all things to keep in mind when you're thinking about what you've taken in the past and what you're going to take next year. And if we have any underclassmen in the room, you know, what they're going to take in future years as well. So just something to consider. All right, so when we're talking about 4-year colleges and universities, what are we talking about? And there are definitely, there's a lot. I mean, there are thousands of colleges, lots to choose from. We can break them down into some categories. We have our public universities. So very straightforward. Washington State University, University of Washington, Eastern Washington University, Western Washington University. Every state has public universities, and you can kind of rely that if you are an in-state resident of those states that you have a cheaper tuition and overall kind of an easier access to a 4-year university within your state. Private universities are going to be universities that are privately funded. Sometimes they are religious universities. Those are kind of bundled together. Locally, Seattle University is considered as a private university. In state, we also have, Gonzaga University, or thinking through a little bit more, maybe Seattle Pacific University is another one. Liberal arts colleges are colleges that offer a smaller college experience. So those are going to be schools that don't have, classes with 400 or 500 students in them. They're going to be classes that offer more of a broad academic experience, and they generally have a discussion-based kind of style. There's more relationships between professors and students. So depending on what you're looking for in a learning experience, you can kind of think about your environment and where you learn best and what you're thinking about for your future, and relate it to one of these categories. Career colleges are colleges that offer bachelor's degrees that are pretty specific to a trade or something to prepare you for a future career. Excuse me. And city colleges are sometimes called not community colleges. City colleges are also like a smaller city-based college that offer a bachelor's degree. And I am blanking on an example right now. Does anyone, Mr. Biddle or Mr. Malaki, can you think of an example off the top of your head? I'm on Spotlight, so I'm pressured.
For a city college that offers
yeah.
bachelor's degree? Bellevue College.
Oh, that's a great example.
Yeah.
City college. Yeah, and they offer a variety of four-year degrees. All right, moving along. So when we think about planning for senior year, when we think about the different kinds of applications that you might run into, you might be thinking, depending on what's on your list, you might be creating accounts and engaging with several different portals or platforms. Common Application is, like its name, very common. It has 894 colleges on it, but one application. So that is a really great step. Looking at the colleges that are on the Common App and kind of understanding that you will have basically you will have one home base for your college applications if you're using the Common App. It also connects with Naviance, so we'll have access to you'll be able to also use Naviance to apply through the Common App. And some examples are Seattle U, Chapman University, Boston College. The Coalition application is very similar to the Common App. It's growing. University of Washington Seattle uses the Coalition for applications, as well as University of Oregon. University of Oregon also has its own separate application, so you can go either way with them. But if you were going to apply to UW Seattle and considering University of Oregon, that might be a good choice too, to use the Coalition. And then there are application portals that are system-wide. So they take an entire university system, such as the California State University system, and you'll apply. So it's kind of similar, but it's going to be restricted to that one system of application. And then, of course, there are colleges that have their own applications that they want you to fill out. So when you're looking at your list of colleges that you want to apply to, and I'll talk a little bit about that later, one thing to keep in mind is, how am I going to apply to this school? Because for every different portal that you use, that's going to be more time, that's going to be more resources that you might need. It also might mean just learning how to navigate a different website, which, as you all know from this year, it's not always super, super easy. So, so keep that in mind as you're searching. Okay, and here are some application options for when you will apply. So the big question that I get a lot is, should I apply early action or early decision? What's the difference? What are the benefits? The thing to know is that early decision is a binding decision that you are making. So if you are applying to a college as an early decision applicant, what you are saying is that I will go to this school if I get accepted. It is binding. And that is might be a good choice for you if you have your sights set on a very specific school that has an early decision option. Early action is is like early decision. It's the same timeline, usually November, early November, but it is not binding. So you might have some time after you get accepted if you're using an early action timeline to say like, okay, I know where I was accepted early and now I can wait on a general or regular decision. Regular decision college applications are not binding either. And they have, this says November through January, but actually there are some regular decision colleges that are accepting applications even through March. So you kind of have some time to then think about it. And then rolling universities will accept based on how many spots they have available. So you could still be applying to those schools much later in the year. One thing to know is that for the most part, you're going to have to make a decision by May 1st of your senior year. And that is really important to keep in mind, is that May 1st deadline. And the spring is really exciting because we tend to know a lot about where seniors get accepted like in March and April, and then making those decisions and having those conversations is really fun. Just like it says, early decision and early action, they can improve your chances of acceptance because you're entering the applicant pool early. And early decision certainly can help if you are super committed to one university, and you might choose that for a school that you're really interested in, that you're really committed to. All right. I'm going to hand this over now to Mr. Biddle.
Hello. Thank you, Ms. Pacumpra. Much appreciated. I am going to ask my colleagues to please let me know if my sound goes out. I've been having a problem with my microphone, so Ms. Pacumpra and Mr. Malaki, please just give me a signal. Thank you. So I'm really excited to talk about the Western Undergraduate Exchange, or you might hear us call it the WUI. So there are some great advantages to this program, and there's really a lot of schools and programs that are available. So it's 16 states and territories. I'm going to show you a map in a moment that shows which states are involved in this agreement. 160 participating colleges and universities. And basically the idea is that if you are a student in the state of Washington, you could potentially get in-state tuition or a percentage that's close to that amount of tuition, like you're an in-state student. So as a lot of you know, if you, let's say, move to the state of California and you want to be a senior, want to be a student there, it is really hard to establish residency as a student. So if you're thinking about, oh, okay, I want to move to California, I want to go to, I don't want to use the UCs as an example because they actually, only one participates in the WUI, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But it's a way that you can go there and actually keep the tuition costs down. So on the next slide, I'm going to show you actually some specific states and programs. So as you can see from this map, almost every school, so west of the Dakotas, Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, Alaska, and Hawaii are involved in this. So even University of Hawaii, several campuses. I was looking today, University of Hawaii at Maui is like $8,500 a year, and they have several programs in that. So that's the same price as going to Western. So I know Dr. Eichner is listening right now. He's a Western grad, but just think he could have actually gone to school in Maui for the same price as going to Western. So a couple of examples that I found, and they've actually gone up a little bit. So Boise State, last time I looked at this chart, was under $7,000, but their price per year, if you go through the WUI exchange, is $82.98. Almost all of their majors are included in this, which is really exciting. As I mentioned a moment ago, only one UC participates in this, UC Merced. All of their majors apply. UC Merced, if you've been to Merced, not sure you want to spend 4 years of your life there, but it's possible. I grew up like 30 miles from there, so I probably wouldn't want to go back there. But as far as education goes, they have great programs. Cal Poly Pomona. So if you are a student that's interested in architecture or engineering, Cal Poly Pomona actually, as a state school, so it's a Cal State University, not a UC, but a Cal State University, offers in-state tuition of $8,600 for those competitive programs, which is fantastic. You would be paying close to $30,000 as a non-resident in the state of California if you were to go direct. And then University of Arizona is always an interesting one to chat about because they offer one major. But University of Arizona, you know, top 100 school, it's amazing. However, mining engineering. So if you're interested in being a mining engineer, go through the WUI program and you can pay $16,000 to go to University of Arizona in Tucson. All right, so the next slide is something I'm also really excited to talk about. So when we talk about schools maybe leaving the state of Washington, most people think, well, I might go to the UCs, maybe I'll look at Ohio State or go to Alabama to watch football. Or you could go across the border if you want to go to school in Canada, go to a school like University of British Columbia, which is a top 50 school in the world. Just right, how far is that? Maybe 150 miles from here. And then the programs that I know a lot about, and the Canadian schools, if you come up from a family that has Canadian ties or you can get a Canadian passport, the cost is negligible. It's very inexpensive for students to go there if you can do dual citizenship or have some connection to Canada. So for some students, that might be an option. Universities in the UK. So I have done my best to build out my capacity and understanding around the universities in the United Kingdom. I've gone and spent some time there. There's a lot of fantastic things about the universities in the UK. First of all, 2 of the top 5 universities in the world, Oxford and Cambridge, obviously are in the UK, but there's a whole bunch of universities there that have top tier education. And one of the things parents you might want to think about is that most bachelor's degrees in the United Kingdom only take 3 years instead of 4. So if you think about a school, and their tuition is similar to the US. So if you think about a school that costs $18,000, University of Newcastle, $18,000 a year, your student goes there for 3 years, then you're talking about $50,000. So that's not as expensive as even going to University of Washington. So just something to think about. There's some great options, great website to look at, and these slides will be available to you later, as we said in the notes, but ukcollegeadmissions.com. You can get a ton of information there, walk you through the process, how you apply, what you need to get into those schools. And those schools, there's a straightforward admissions policy, which we really like, because in the US, it's really hard to know whether you're going to get into a school or not. So one of the nice things about schools in the UK is that. Of course, other European countries, there's a lot of great opportunities. Again, countries like Germany, if you have ties to Germany, if you speak German and go to school in Germany, you go to school for free. That's right, go to college for free in the country of Germany. So there are several European countries that if you move there and go to college, the cost is negligible or zero in some cases, which is fantastic, of course. Schools around the world. Obviously, there's schools all around the world. There's 25,000 universities on the planet. So just thinking about, where you want to go to school, do some research. If you are a person that's interested in ranking, which I know some of us are, that's kind of how we make decisions as we look at, what schools might be ranked, what programs might be ranked. I think some great resources are the QS Top University Report and the World University Rankings from London Times Higher Education. As you will learn by doing your own research, that the US News sometimes has some interesting ways of ranking schools, and schools can skew the ranking by making a certain admitted class a little bit more competitive, by only allowing 3,000 students in a year instead of 5,000. They can actually raise their ranking. So I tend to not use them when I'm speaking with families, but these are 2 great options here if you're interested. And then I'm going to move on to community colleges or local colleges, what would traditionally be city colleges or community colleges. So Seattle colleges, so we have a great partnership with Seattle colleges. Specifically out of our building, we work mostly with North, but there are 3 colleges in Seattle, North, Central, and South. They have associate's and bachelor's degrees. They have college to career programs, some great career training programs, transfer programs. So they have programs where if you go in, then you receive your associate's degree and you receive a certain GPA, you could be guaranteed admission to another school that you may be interested in. They have e-learning, so they have a lot of virtual learning opportunities. And then if you look at the map on the side, you will see that in the state of Washington, we actually have 34 public colleges and technical colleges that would be considered community colleges. One of the advantages about Seattle specifically, if you are a graduate, so we meant to have a couple of partners here tonight. So we reached out to our representative at University of Washington and our representative at Seattle Promise. And unfortunately, the platform that we are using made it very, very challenging to have them come in. So Seattle Public Schools, within Teams Live, we have to be a member of Seattle Public Schools to present sometimes. So forgive us for that. But I have this is from our representative, Kelsey, today. So this is the explanation for Seattle Promise. If you don't mind, I'm actually going to read this one. So Seattle Promise will provide up to 2 years or 90 credits of free tuition at North Seattle, Seattle Central, or South Seattle. Seattle Promise is available to all SPS graduating seniors who apply and complete the program milestones. So just a little quick thing. So they have some requirements. You have to remain eligible. So if you fail all of your classes 1 quarter, they might put you on probation and then they might pull this. This is considered a scholarship, but it's for everyone. So that's what's fantastic about this. Full program information, milestones, and applications can be found on their website. And Lincoln Families, this is actually your contact if you are interested in more information. So I'm really excited to pass this on. Your student and students, if you're here listening, I don't know what the makeup of our audience is currently, but you could actually go to school for 2 years and get your associate's degree, transfer into University of Washington as a junior, and save a ton of money and know what direction you want to go. It's a great opportunity to take some classes, see where your interests lie, and then transition to a 4-year school to get your bachelor's degree. And just a little secret, when you're going job hunting, most people want to know where your bachelor's degree is from. They don't really ask about your associate's degree once you get a bachelor's degree. Just a little secret. Nobody knows I started at community college. Just saying. Well, you all do now, all 160 of you. So there you go. So I'm going to pass this over to Mr. Malaki and be back shortly.
Good. Yeah, thanks, Mr. Biddle. Thank you for reminding us about the Seattle Promise. It's an awesome way to help alleviate the cost for our families, having to pay for college. So, one of the pathways that students can take after graduating from high school is taking a gap year. And what a gap year is just a year after graduating, and you're going to be using it meaningfully, doing some self-reflection, some volunteer work, possibly work study, things like that. One of the most important things about a gap year is you want to make sure you use it to grow as a person. Why a gap year? A lot of different reasons. Sometimes after taking a senior year of highly rigorous coursework, students get burnt out, and so it's just another opportunity to prevent that burnout, so they go into college nice and refreshed. And also it's another chance for students to just, grow as people, learn a skill, have an opportunity to really stay focused on a volunteer opportunity. Pros and cons. Some of the positives I wrote down was that, again, students can, feel refreshed, opportunity to learn a skill that they don't have an opportunity to learn during the school year or high school year, or high school time. One of the cons is, unfortunately, if it's not structured, what could happen is it could be a waste of time. And so you're going to want to go into this gap year with a really great goals in mind, a structured plan to make sure you're growing as a person. And then, and if you are thinking about a gap year, if that sounds like something you and your family decide as a possible option or option that would be good for you, You're gonna want to check into what the college says, the college of your dreams says about what they think about a gap year. I know a lot of colleges out there prefer that students go and do volunteer work and things like that before going to school, so that they're more globally, or thinking more globally. That is what some colleges think, and so you just want to be open or be thoughtful about what the college of your dreams say about a gap year. And on there, some really great websites that kind of talk more about how to structure your gap year, and different programs available to help you with that gap year. And then we want to talk about making a plan. And so it's really important now, no matter where you are, if you're a 9th grade family, 10th grade family, 11th grade family, you're going to want to start thinking about high school, life after high school. On this website, or on this slide, forgive me, are some really great websites that sort of talk about what sort of things at each month of your high school life you can take in order to get ready for life outside of school, whether it's, you know, in your freshman year, going and visiting a college, university, get excited, things like that, or having a conversation with a financial planner about affording college, different sort of things that need to be thought about when you and your family to think about life after high school. And then there's Naviance. That's another spot. I'll go into detail a little bit more about that. Actually, Ms. Pocampo, would you mind? Yeah, Naviance is just another tool that your Lincoln student will have or has access to. It's just a really great tool, college career tool, to get your child, your student, to be thinking about life after high school. On there are some really great bulleted tools they have available. You can look for colleges. Road Trip Nation is a really wonderful video archive of experts in a particular field of study, career field of study, and they kind of talk about what they did in order to get to that point in their life. And so that's just another wonderful tool. Many of your students did it in elementary school, or I'm sorry, in middle school, right, and did that assignment. But it's a really great opportunity to just go and hear from experts in different career paths and how they got there and things like that. And listed there are different reasons why you're going to want to go into Naviance. And just to let you students know and families know that throughout the school year, depending on what age you are, you're going to be given different lessons and mentorship that are regarding Naviance. And then this slide is just sort of, you know, college fairs. You're going to want to learn about all the different colleges and what's available. And here, since, you know, we are in this COVID time, you know, right here are some really great websites that you can go to where you can attend a virtual college fair. This Big Future Days is put on by the College Board, and we'll have that one, or that will be available on February 6th. And yeah, feel free to check those out when you have a moment. And Ms. Pocampo.
Hello again. So as we're getting into the meat of really thinking about what you're going to do and how you're going to plan for the future, and how do I start making college list, and should I consider a 2-year school or a 4-year school, and all of those things, I always say to a student and put them on the spot, and I say, well, what is important to you? What is important to you about your living environment, your learning environment, your social environment? Is it important to you to know exactly what you're going to study going in? There are specific options that are great for you in that regard. Is it important to you to be close to your family? Is it important to you to be far away from your family? Is it important to you to be able to afford living on your own in the city where you go to college? Those are all very important questions that you should ask yourself. I talked to a student the other day who said, I don't want to go to a college where I have to take a class with more than like 100 people. And I said, that is so good to know. That is a great metric. And if that is something that is a non-negotiable for you, oh my gosh, we just eliminated a lot of options. So having that kind of thought process, you as a student, we've talked about this in our presentation earlier this year, but I'm going to reiterate what I said because I think it's really important, is to really think and dig deep and maybe make a list of those things that are important to you. Maybe ask yourself some of these questions and answer them to the best of your ability. And parents, I think that you can really help your student kind of work through some of this by like having those conversations as a family, if that is something that is important to you, but also maybe thinking through how this choice is made earlier on is really student focused. And it's really just making sure that when we are thinking about different school options, different pathway options, that we're looking for the best fit and the best match to that individual. And a lot of the time, this whole process, it can feel like a race, or it can feel like a competition, or it can feel like even if somebody knows exactly where they want to go, that they're further along than you, and that's just not true. We really want you to approach this the way that you would want to find a friend, or the way that you would want to pick a sport that you want to play, or an activity that you want to join. It's really about fit and match, and finding the best match for you. So as far as thinking about that, I think that's a really good place to start, and exploring those options. Mr. Malaki shared some resources for looking at Naviance as an option. There's a college search function in there that can help you work through some of those details. Niche.com is another great resource for you to look at different college, what's the word I'm looking for? Different aspects of a college experience and comparing them to one another. And to really explore and to keep all those things in mind as you're exploring. And then as you're exploring, starting to really narrow down what that list looks like. And so let's talk about that list. So we're going to recommend that students who are starting this list for the first time to start around 6 to 8 schools. That's a different number for some students. I have definitely had students in the past come to me with a list of 30 schools and be like, I don't know what to do, and that's okay. We can also always help you with any kinds of issues that you're having with narrowing this down for yourself. I've also had the other end where there's only 2 schools I want to go to, and these are where I'm going to apply. Generally, I'm going to recommend 6 to 8, and we want you to kind of think about them in the following categories. First, safety schools. So you might have heard this term before. This is basically a school where you know that your academic credentials, so what you're coming into the application process with, exceeds the school's range for their first-year student. So you're looking at your GPA, you're comparing it, you're looking at any test scores that they might require, you're looking at the rigor of your classes. You're gonna then have a couple of those schools be target schools. So that is kind of where you are hitting the mark for that school's academic credentials, and that you know that you have a pretty good chance of being accepted to that school based off of your student profile, of who you are as a student. And then you're going to have your reach schools, and those are going to be schools that are kind of maybe a long shot, or however you want to say it, but schools that you're really interested in applying to, and schools that are possible for you. And for all of these categories, I want to add that they should all be schools that you're okay with going to, that you're okay with moving to that place and enrolling in that school. So if you have a safety school on your list that doesn't excite you, that you don't want to go to, generally I would say, in the chance that that's the only school that you end up being able to go to for whatever reason that is, please be excited to go there, because it is important, and it is important that you are feeling excited. College is really exciting, and you should be excited to go to wherever you are enrolling. Collegedata.com is a great site. It's a great resource for looking at your student profile and who you are as an applicant, and it gives you some data around schools that you can apply to where you would be more likely to be accepted, and also kind of like where some of these schools might fall in and that's compared to who you are as an applicant. So that might be something fun for you to do. All of this should be somewhat fun and as low pressure as possible, because we're still early. And also, if you hit a roadblock or you're stressed or you're having some kind of overwhelming feelings about this process, please reach out to us, your counselors, to have a conversation about that process and where you can where you're hitting a wall and where we can help you work through that. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. It is my favorite thing to talk about. So please let us in on those processes, and we can definitely help you. So in the application process, there are many steps, and different schools will have different requirements. So it's really important in your list to, we're going to put together some resources for you as you're making your list. So different ways that you can categorize the schools you're looking at or separate what they require. I think that it's important to know as you're going into the college application process how much time you're going to need and what you're going to need to do, so that you're not running into those last minute requirements. It's like, oh shoot, this application is due tomorrow and I need a letter of recommendation. That's a bummer. That's a huge bummer. So please set yourself up for success in that way. So very shortly, the counseling department will put out a brag sheet. A brag sheet is basically a tool that you will use to literally brag about yourself and to let us know, or let the teachers know, teachers that you're asking for letters of recommendation, what you want them to put in a letter for you. How do you describe yourself? What are some accomplishments that you have? How do you work through struggle? What's an example of that? What are your relationships like with teachers? And you can definitely look for that very soon in your Schoology and on the website. We recommend asking for teachers for letters of recommendation starting later this year in the spring. Hang on just a second. Please make sure before you ask for a letter of recommendation from a teacher that the colleges that you are interested in applying for require them. Please do not have anybody write a letter for you when you don't actually need one. So if you are maybe further along in the process and you know where you're applying, you can find that information out now. If you are still making your list, but you're going to take the next couple of months to really look for some things and look at different aspects of the application process, you might realize that there are a couple of schools that will need a letter of recommendation, and generally you can use those letters on all of your applications. So don't worry about needing like 2 for each school. Generally, you can use them widely. Please make a resume, and actually that is a Naviance required activity anyway. So you will be fulfilling a graduation requirement. You will also be setting yourself up for your college applications. Please create a professional email account. I've had some funny student emails applied to schools, and I will say that when you're setting up the school accounts at the universities, please keep in mind that those might be your emails. So if you choose like football guy 27 in the UW application portal, that is your email. So that means that's your email when you're a student, that's your email as a grad student, that's your email if you ever go to work for UW. That is attached to your social security number. And I am telling you right now from personal experience, not me, a friend, that you do not want to make that mistake, okay? So have a professional email account, have something that is boring and basic, but it has your name in it so that people can find you and is really straightforward, so that you are not running into sitting down with your graduate professor 7 or 8 years from now and having to explain why your name is football guy 27. Grammarly is a great thing to have on hand to make sure that your grammar is correct in your email exchanges or whatever you're working on. And then lastly, keep in mind your social media footprint. Colleges are looking at your social media. They are trying to find you. You can help yourself out a lot by making sure that the stuff that you are putting out onto the internet, stuff that you cannot take back, represents you in a way that makes you feel like you are representing yourself to be a solid applicant. I would just hate for that to be a reason why you wouldn't get accepted somewhere. And there are lots of examples that you can find in the news of either applications being pulled or students even getting kicked out of school after finding out what's on your social media. So please be very aware that that stuff is out there and it cannot be deleted or erased. And then what do they consider? When they get your application, what are they looking at? Well, they're going to look firstly at the rigor of courses, and they're going to look at the rigor of courses compared to what you could have taken at your school. So they're going to look at the basically how hard the classes are, how difficult or challenging they are in that line. They're going to look at your GPA. They're going to look at your SAT or your ACT score if you take this. This is changing, and we do get this question a lot. There are many things in flux around standardized testing. We know for certain that, for example, University of Washington is not considering any standardized testing in their application process for 5 years. So I imagine that that will be something that is considered in future years as well. They will read your essay, and there's nothing like a college essay. So, you know, you've probably never written a college essay before, and they really are unlike any essay that you write. There are lots of resources on College Board, and I actually even think in Naviance around different prompts that you can find. If you Google like college essay prompts, you can find prompts that have been used in the past, and you can practice thinking through how to write about yourself and brag about yourself in a way that is also humble and makes you unique. And that's a very, very tricky kind of balance to find. And then they'll also read your letter of recommendations if that school requires them. And then they'll lastly look at your extracurricular activities or the things that you're involved in. And this says depth, not breadth, because they're really looking at what you were committed to and the things that you really put your heart and soul into. Having a list of 30 things that you did in high school might look cool, but it generally what they want to know is, like, how do you commit to something and see it through? And this slide is listed in the order of importance, I would say, to most colleges, is within the kind of the order in which they look at things. All right. This is still my slide, right? Or is this Mr. Biddle's slide? Okay, cool. Awesome. Sorry, I'm also managing the back end of the slideshow, so I don't have my notes in front of me. So when they're looking at all of these components of your application, what are they looking at? Well, they're looking at you as an individual. They're looking at your impact on the world and their university. Basically, like, how do you fit in and what will you accomplish in the time that you're there? And that can sound really overwhelming, but I will say that that it is important to think about, like, your citizenship of that school. It is a mutual investment. So they're investing in you and you're investing in them. And when they invest in you and you go out into the world after you're a graduate, you are also representing that school for the rest of your life. So they are aware of that and they're looking at what that looks like. Most colleges are looking at diversity and how to create a diverse environment, diversity of thought and culture and study. How are you different, and what is that? How can you make your differences shine? And I think that is a question that you can kind of start to ask yourself right now. Are you globally or community focused, and what does your service look like, and how committed were you to that? I would add to that, how committed were you to that service? Global thought, global focus is really important to colleges. So keep that in mind, that when you're making your decisions around like whether or not to take another year of world language, or what kind of service learning you want to do, or how do you show that you are thinking outside of yourself and thinking outside of your immediate bubble, that you're thinking about that as a college applicant as well, and how you can describe that to colleges. So like, are you a person of character? Are you a hard worker? Do you have grit? What does that mean? It means, can you work through a challenge? Can you problem solve within yourself? maybe you're kind of, you've never really had to ask yourself that before, and you can think about a challenge that you faced and how you worked through that. That's a very common application essay question, by the way, is have you ever ran up against a challenge and how do you work through it? It's very common. And are you ready for the rigors of college? So are you academically ready? And they'll look at that in your application. Is this person ready to take on this individual independent work? And I think all of these questions are really, really valid, and that's what they're doing when they're looking at your application, is thinking through these things. The finances, the big dollar signs. So looking at finances, let me first say that finances are important and money is really difficult to talk about. So for families that maybe this is the first time you're talking about finances as a family, I want to say I completely empathize with that experience. And just to share a personal story, I did not have that conversation with my family until I was applying to college, and it was stressful and uncomfortable. And a big reason why I ended up going to a community college was because I needed to save and make that money stretch out over 4 years. So it's really good for you to have a general idea of your budget and to kind of know generally what you need, but please don't let it be a deal breaker, because there's a lot of ways that you can pay for colleges that are maybe considered more expensive. There's also major sticker shock with different kinds of colleges. So if you're looking, for example, at a private versus a public university and you're looking at the price, I would say, yes, private schools are generally more expensive. They also generally have more resources and generally have bigger endowments in ways that they can find money for applicants. So keep that in mind. Look at your scholarships, and I'm really happy to go over these. Maybe we'll probably talk more about this more in detail next year, but generally scholarships fit into three categories. They're school-based, which means they're like university-based, and those generally have deadlines that are earlier in the year. So as you're making your plan for the year, like Mr. Malaki pointed out earlier, keep also in mind scholarship deadlines. Many of them are the same as the early action deadline. So many of them are early in November. So you can't wait to get accepted to apply to scholarships. Make sure that you're applying to the scholarships as an applicant so that you don't miss an opportunity to save some money. Some scholarships are community-based. I think about this scholarship that I read when I worked in Beaverton, Oregon, and it was the Beaverton Orchid Society had a scholarship every year for $500 for a graduating senior in the Beaverton School District, and you had to write an essay about why you liked orchids, and it was great. You can always find a reason to write. So those are some things that you can look at. You can look at some community-based organizations. Most of them have some kind of small scholarship that they can offer. And then there are some state-based. So this would be scholarships that are only offered to graduates within the state. And then there, of course, there are some financial aid options that are also offered within different schools. Like, different private schools will have different things as well. The FAFSA, which is required for most universities to receive aid, it's also required for many, many scholarships to apply to. That opens in October of 12th grade, and we will talk about that more as a senior. And that will be a step-by-step talking about what the FAFSA is and how it can help you. And they use your tax and estimated family contribution. That information comes from this year's taxes. So it's just something to keep in mind. We're heading into tax season, so it's something to keep in mind. All right, Mr. Biddle, take it away. Talking about testing.
All right, testing. This is so exciting. We've gotten some questions in our Q&A about testing also, so we will definitely try to address those. So the SBA, the SBAC, Washington State is still making decisions on the tests. I think we're pretty secure in knowing that we won't be offering those tests this year. So for 10th and 11th graders, that could impact you. We are creating some alternates to these tests, so we can do pathways and courses that we can provide that show the same mastery of the information. So that's something we're working on in the background right now. AP tests. If you are currently in an AP class, so we have 393 students at Lincoln that are currently taking an AP class, 100% of them are currently registered for the test. However, if you aren't sure, so if you're one of those students and you're not sure you want to take the test this year, we probably will be offering the test because College Board has just released an online version. So we will open up our payment window in 11 days, and you can make your decision in the month of February whether or not you think you want to take that test. So if you don't pay, it's not going to hurt you in any way that you're already registered. We will actually just unregister you for the test, and you won't have that option. There are some advantages to taking an AP exam. So some colleges will waive courses depending on your score. So typically that starts with a 3, 4, or 5, depending on the subject area and the college. So we can't answer about all colleges. You can look and see, you know, who offers credit for AP World History and what do they offer? Do they offer an actual history credit, or do they just do a waiver for an elective? So a lot of colleges handle these differently. Also, taking an AP class, which we didn't mention previously, can give you a bump in your GPA in some schools, and we had that question in the Q&A. So for some schools, they will actually weigh your GPA on a 5-point scale for an advanced learning class, so either AP or a running start class from the community college. So something to think about. The PSAT, so what is happening with the PSAT and how will it affect the National Merit Scholarship? So we are having this discussion right now. In fact, we had it today. So Seattle Public Schools is trying to decide whether or not they're going to try to have a PSAT or an SAT between now and the end of the school year. For National Merit this year, they are allowing both the PSAT and the SAT scores to count. I got a great question from a student last night, whether or not they need to take the essay. And I didn't know the answer until about 3 hours ago when College Board released a press release that they will no longer be offering the essay. So things are changing literally day by day. The College Board today announced they will no longer be offering AP subject tests or the essay included in the PSAT or the SAT. So we'll talk about SATs here in a second. But for National Merit, they are allowing you to do both of those this year, the SAT and the PSAT. We will get out information shortly about what we're doing as we move forward, but it will be in alignment with SPS. SAT or ACT. So, Ms. P, if we could see the next slide, please. Thank you. The SAT or the ACT, these are two different tests offered by two different companies. The SAT is offered by College Board. ACT is offered by ACT or ACT.org. I don't know their official name. Maybe it's just ACT. But are they currently taking place? So from what I understand, over the last week, there are some pop-ups kind of starting to happen. So if you go on either of those websites, and we should have added them here. Maybe we can add them. We'll see if we, make an announcement. I will add those websites to this so you can see, but basically it's collegeboard.org or act.org, and you can search for testing sites in the area and see who is offering the test. So Ms. Pakumpara and Mr. Malaki today both mentioned sites that are local. Mr. Malaki, I think you said the ACT is happening at Franklin, is that correct? Garfield. I'm reading.
Yeah, Franklin and another school in the Bellevue School District.
Okay, thank you, sir. So yeah, so when you go on the website, it'll tell you who is offering the test. Right now, Lincoln is not an approved testing site. So the only test that we would be offering is the school day version, and we are not doing that at this point. So we're looking at whether or not we'll become an SAT or ACT test site if we're allowed to do that. do college require these tests? So this is changing also. So as of this year, for the 2021 through 2025 graduating classes, the University of Washington has actually suspended this. The UC system has suspended it, and the UC system has actually gone as far as to say they are doing blind testing consideration, which means they won't even look at it. So I think that UW and a couple other schools are saying, well, we're not saying we're not going to look at it, but we're not requiring it. So they become test optional. So because there's, as we mentioned, 25,000 schools in the world and upwards of 5,000 just in the US, we can't keep track of what everyone is doing. But what we can say is that they are losing importance, maybe, but for specific majors, you still may want to consider it. If you're trying to be as competitive as possible, just throwing this out there, I'm not saying anyone has to do this or, you know, this is going to make or break an application, but if you're applying to Caltech and you're interested in going into engineering at Caltech, one of the most prestigious programs on the planet, you may want to consider doing everything that you would typically do in a given year to try to get into a program like that. So just the consideration there. Get this question a lot. Do colleges care which test you take? The answer is no. So it is a complete marketing thing. So I have never had a conversation with a college admissions rep that says that they prefer one test over the other. They want to see which test you do better on if you continue to move forward in your thoughts about testing and actually take a test. So on the East Coast, they actually prefer the ACT, and from what Ms. Pacumpera says, I think even in Oregon, or her school district was an ACT district. On the West Coast, typically you'll hear schools are promoting the SAT more. So it's really a marketing thing. Colleges don't care which one. We just suggest you focus on the one that you would do better on. And how would you know? So I'm going to skip down a little bit. So Princeton Review and a couple other companies offer some practice tests that have retired questions from both. And when you take that test, at the end, it actually tells you which test you would score higher on. Now, for some of us that aren't great test takers, maybe we'll look, somewhat even on those two tests. The one you want to focus on is the SAT. And the reason is it is easier to increase your scores on the SAT than the ACT. I have no stock in College Board. In fact, I wish they would go away, but that is the reality of it. So tonight I might be promoting College Board just a little bit and saying, if you do equally well on those two practice tests, you might want to focus on the SAT because you can actually probably raise your scores a little bit better. Some great resources to look for practice tests, and these are required tests, are Khan Academy, College Board. College Board has a whole bunch of tests on there. Khan Academy does. You can get free tutorials on Khan Academy, which is fantastic. Of course, there's a whole bunch of testing companies out there. We don't vet any of them. Some of them are bigger than others, so you can assume they've had some success. For those of you who are interested in paying for a class for test prep, I would say you can probably find most of those resources on your own. That's not something that we promote and say is the best idea in the world. So yeah, that would definitely be up to you. Let me go back to this question that came up about the PSAT a moment ago and make sure I answered it. Give me just a moment. Oh, so okay, so there's been a lot of questions about like students being penalized because of what's happened because of COVID, and that's both in classes and in testing. We don't have any data on this, so there isn't any data right now based on the fact that we're still in the middle of this. We would assume by the adjustments that school districts are making, the different policies that colleges are throwing our way, that they will consider that everyone is impacted by what is happening nationwide and worldwide, and they will take that into consideration. And you have to recognize that you, at least in the state of Washington, are applying against students who are also in the state of Washington with the same guidelines. Now, you're not necessarily in the same situation as someone who lives in Arkansas, because maybe they're back in school full time and that's the decisions they've made. But my assumption is that colleges will consider that you are in a region that has had some that has been affected by this pandemic, and that they will take that into consideration. That's what all of the information that we read tells us. So that's that. So Q&A. Thank you, Ms. Pacumpera. I think that maybe one thing we want to do is go back, even though we've published the answers. So we do have one unanswered question. So let me look at it really quick. Will test optional be like essay optional, where it actually does not count against you and not have a test score? Yeah, so again, I just want to reiterate that sometimes I think of college admissions kind of in a more simple way than all of the little caveats, and that is Mr. Malaki and I on paper look really similar. We both want to go to the same school. We both want to go to UW into the direct admit engineering class, and Mr. Malaki has taken AP Calculus and AP Physics C, and I have not. So just like, or maybe he's taken the SAT and maybe he did really well in the math section and I did not, or I didn't take it. So sometimes I think that it's really important, even in a holistic application, to think about the fact that colleges aren't trying to disqualify us, but if there's one seat left, Mr. Malaki and I are both on the bubble, who are they going to choose? That's how I look at college applications. So thinking about what can I do, what do I have control over, and how I might approach that. So that's how I might go with that. I have a question I'm gonna put one of you on the spot. I am gonna highlight the artist formerly known as Miss Shu. Miss Pacumpera. Question for you. Will we be talking about IEPs and college choices? Is that something you know anything about?
That's a great question. I would say that we have those conversations individually with IEP case managers and families, and that is because an IEP, we have many students with many different situations according to their IEPs, many different pathways. So I would say we're not going to touch on that tonight, but but it will come up in high school IEP meetings. There is a transition portion of IEP meetings at the high school level where students are actually meeting with their counselors and often their IEP case managers and often their parents to talk about what their options are. And that can be anything from like transition programs between high school and colleges, or like work programs, all the way to incredibly selective colleges. And so that IEP bucket is quite large, and the pathways within them are endless. So I would say most of this information tonight can also apply to many IEP students, and we can definitely meet with, we are required to, and we love it. We'll be meeting with you to talk about your specific student and their specific pathways. Thank you, Mr. B. Oh, you're muted, Mr. B.
The first "you are muted" of the night. Dang it, and it was me. Okay, I own it. So I also would like to offer that we are going to be partnering more with the PTSA, and one of the things that I know that is really important to them, as I have spoken with a couple people about this, is making sure that at our next presentation that there will be someone to talk about different programs with DSPS, or what IEP services look like at the post-secondary level, and some colleges that may be better fit for students with specific needs or with IEPs. So let me read another question here. So there's a testing question. So I'll just take this one since I'm still on camera. What happens if you choose not to take an AP test, even if you've taken the class? So the class itself could still be weighted for you. It still shows you're taking a rigorous class. But I have spoken with admissions reps that say that they do not prefer it. So to them, they just want to see that you've actually gotten something out of the class. And it looks really strange if a student gets an A or B in a class and doesn't take the final, basically, which is how they may look at the AP exam. So you wouldn't be showing that you actually mastered the content of the class. So they may want you to do that. So something to definitely consider. Thank you, Mr. Malaki. I see that note there. So college application window. Do we want to talk about this? Miss Pacumpera, I'm so sorry to do that. Miss Pacumpera, you spoke about this already a little bit, so I'm going to throw you back in here just to talk about the window, sure, whether it's juniors or seniors, and maybe when.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we touched on this back in one of my slides. I know we threw a lot of information out, so, you know, obviously it's a lot to sift through. So you will apply to colleges in your senior year, and that usually the earliest deadline that I am aware of is November 1st. And that's when many early decision and early action deadlines are. That will go, depending on your list and where you're applying, that application window usually can go through March. So, but the busiest time is November, December, and January. That's kind of where the hot tickets are for application windows. So in your junior year, you should be making your list and thinking about the plan that you need for senior year. So maybe on that list of colleges in your junior year, you're taking note of those application deadlines. They generally do not change. So if this year the application was due on December 15th, next year you can imagine it will most likely be around the same time, if not the exact same date. Colleges don't like to change that very much. And you can use your junior year to help plan for your senior year application window. I'll take a question and see. We're getting lots now, which is great. So scrolling through. How do you make an appointment with your counselor? It's a great question, and I think we mentioned that you can do that several times without telling you how. The best way to do it is to log into your Schoology. We each have an appointment tool that you can use that is connected directly with our calendars and allows you to see when we're available. So that's going to be the best way to do it. If you are feeling like you need maybe more time or outside of a window or you're not sure, shoot us an email, give us a couple days to respond, and maybe we can set something up. But the very, very best way to do that is to do that on Schoology, in an app called Bookings. The same link I think will be on the website shortly as well. So Mr. Riddle, we need to find a question for Mr. Malaki to answer. I think our audience misses him. And many of them have been answered. I know he's really busy in the chat. So if you guys, but maybe you guys have this like up on a screen and you're not really active. So I also want to see if there's something really interesting. Mr. Malaki.
Yes.
Are we going to be talking about Running Start tonight?
Tonight, we are not going to be talking about Running Start. When we start registering I believe our 10th graders, we'll have that information available. And then we'll also, when we start registering our 11th graders, we'll also remind them of that opportunity.
Here's another one from your student who I know really well because he was my student last year. I won't say him by name because this is being recorded, but he would like to know, how do you choose a major fit for what you want to do later in life? And what if you don't know what to major in?
Such a sweet answer or question, sorry. I was just sharing with Mr. Biddle earlier today that I was on Naviance through the demo portion. So I was pretending to be a student and seeing what it all looked like. And there's a really great tool in Naviance, if you were to go under where the careers portion is. There's some really great questions that kind of talks to you a little bit about the activities you enjoy, your interests, how you like to work, the things you like to do, and then it prescribes to you some really awesome majors or possibilities or career paths. And so yeah, you can find this tool on Naviance. It's really fascinating. And as a 45-year-old man, it was kind of fun to learn and see what kind of careers I was still interested in.
I want to add one thing to this. So this is actually also, and that's a great answer, Mr. Malaki. Thank you so much. One of the things you want to consider is what schools you're looking at if you don't know what major you want to go into. So University of Washington and a lot of the Washington schools, you go in undeclared, which is fantastic. It's an opportunity for you to go in, take some classes, see if there's any interest. But if you apply to the University of California system, often they make you declare a major prior to you going. And so if you know that you want to be bio pre-med and you want to go to UCLA to do that, and that might be the most competitive major or was before computer science took over maybe, then you want to consider whether or not, you want to go to a school where you have to take, classes all over the map to kind of discover what you want to do, or if you know where you want to go and you want to go straight into a program and get right into your biology sequence and do all of those things immediately. So that's just a consideration when applying as well. Okay, we're getting lots more questions here, so I'm gonna there's another one about is there negative impact if you score poorly on the AP exam? There's actually a couple questions about AP, and I just want to mention, so AP and your choices of which classes you take are individual. Not all students will take AP classes. Not all students, it's not necessarily the best fit for everyone. Right now, in virtual learning, we have students in our building taking 4 or 5 AP classes and having to do 7-8 hours of homework every night, and are kind of regretting maybe how many AP classes they're taking or what they chose for this year. And sometimes you have to think about the fact that the reason we bring it up as rigor first is colleges, unfortunately, a lot of schools still weigh students kind of their choices, which is the rigor of the classes, against what the school offers. But not all of our students are eligible for the same classes in our building. So one of the things that we are going to make sure that we do in our school profile is talk about the different pathways in our building, and that we actually have students in our building that are eligible for advanced classes before other students are. So it is unfair to say, like, oh, we have this 11th grader who can't take AP math because they came into high school in Algebra 1. So colleges wouldn't know that we have different pathways in our building. So we want to make sure that we publish that, and we want to be transparent about that. We think that it's equitable to do that. And when choosing your classes, you need to make sure that if you really like humanities, maybe you talk to Miss O'Hearn or Miss Castle about whether or not they think you should take AP English, because it might be more challenging. It might have some different text that's interesting to you, or the books that they're using. So think about it that way. If you have an interest area, that's where you should start. The AP exams, I do think that colleges will consider that COVID has impacted a lot of things. I would imagine the average score will be lower this year. So it's something to think about. Again, we're all kind of in the same boat, including counselors struggling with this too, and trying to figure out the best way to get through everything. So they know that a lot of students are having challenges right now, and I don't think it will impact college admission across the board. So that's just one thing I wanted to address. Oh, Miss Pacumpera. Sorry, the reason I keep saying shoe is because it still says shoe on your thing. They need to change that. The district is digging in their heels and won't change her email.
No.
So there's a private answer here to the question about Running Start. So Running Start, we will actually be having Running Start meetings in March and be talking about that a little bit more. We have a representative at North that will come and talk about Running Start. Ms. Pacumpera, since I just put you on the spot, I'm going to ask you another question here. Talk about summer. So there's questions about service learning in summer, but also maybe talk about, there's questions about health, always questions about health, and how students can maybe take health outside of our building. So maybe you can talk about just summer plans in general and what might be a good use of time during the summer.
That's a great question. It's a common question. So in general, what I will say is that the Seattle Public Schools Board policy is that students are not permitted to take online coursework, summer coursework outside of SPS without permission, and that generally you are not allowed or permitted to take classes that are offered within your building. So you will not be getting the credit. So I guess sometimes we have students that come in the fall and say, I took all these classes online and I'm ready to put them on my transcript, and we will have to say, no, I'm sorry. And so that's a bummer. But I will say that there are other things that you can do in the summer that are a really good use of your time. And I will say, after this year of spending so much time in front of screens and in classes, maybe you want to shift into using your time in a useful way that is not necessarily academic unless you need it to be. If you absolutely would love to take summer classes, I would say meet with your counselor to talk about your options at the community college level, which would be on your own time and on your own dime, but it is a way for you to take some classes. Our Skills Center at SPS offers some summer programming. Health is one of them, so that is a way for you to take health in the summer, is to do it through the Skills Center. Watch that website quickly. They fill up so fast when they enroll, or when they unveil that program. For service learning, we get a lot of questions about service learning. We're having this conversation a lot. If you are thinking about using your summer to meet your service learning requirement, which is a great use of your time, think about who you are as a person and what's important to you and what your skills are and how you can give back to your community in that way. We are hoping to compile some resources for some local opportunities. But really what I would love to encourage you to think about is kind of using what already makes you you and turning it into a service learning opportunity for yourself. And there's some resources in your Schoology as far as like how to think through that a little bit more in depth. Off the top of my head, I can say that like Seattle TILF has some really incredible summer programs for students that are interested in gardening or agriculture or giving back to their community. They connect a lot with organizations that help people who are experiencing homelessness or are food insecure. So maybe you can hit a double whammy with community garden and helping your community in this other way as well. The public library generally has some really awesome summer programs as well that you can get involved in. The caveat to everything that I'm going to say is that we don't know how they will function this summer. We just don't, and we won't know for some time. And there are some incredible organizations, food banks, humane societies, places that are really reputable and also work with our students and work with teens really regularly that are not necessarily functioning in the same way because of COVID, and that's unfortunate. A student actually told me recently that the food bank, you can volunteer at the food bank, but you need to have a parent with you. So maybe that's something that you guys can talk about as a family, as a summer project or something, is kind of investing in your community together. So That's an option for you as well. I don't know if I hit all the bullet points you thought I might hit, Mr. Biddle. Did I forget anything?
Mr. Biddle and Ms. Bacamper, I was just thinking to piggyback off of the service learning opportunity. I'm going to put in the chat a website called volunteermatch.org, and that's a really great resource for seeing what's available and things like that.
One question in regards to service learning that we just got from the same student, by the way, I will say, who is incredibly participatory, and I just want to shout out this one student. You know who you are. He asked if an internship would count as service learning, and the answer is no. So if you are, so the qualifications for service learning and for meeting those hours is that you should be donating your time with getting nothing in return except the experience and the satisfaction of having done so. And you want to think about where that experience would go on your resume. So if that experience is going to go on your resume under the internship section, it doesn't qualify. If it's going to go under volunteer work, it may qualify, or most likely will. So think about it that way. Good question, though. Will SPS waive volunteer hours if COVID persists? We don't know. That is another one of those things that we are waiting on. We know that they're working on waivers for this year's senior class. We will not know about any underclassmen waivers, maybe not even this year. They might not look at it. That's a Seattle board decision, so that information has to be presented to the board. So, and then they have to make a decision. So I would say that for this year's junior class and below, we may not know until next year, but we are waiting on information. We know that there's conversations happening in the background. We just don't know. And so I would recommend that everybody proceed as if you will need your full 60 hours to graduate. We have some recommendations for, or some. All right.
I am actually going to mention one thing. So there was a question about Link's crew, if those students will receive volunteer hours. We've had some discussions about this, and we think so. We think that it's great. Not the preparation, but the actual service that they're doing. So the time that they're spending serving other students, we will let that count. We do recommend, though, that, you know, one of the things we talked about is the depth versus breadth of service learning. Service learning isn't just about graduating. It is also colleges. Some colleges are looking for service learning. And I know Ms. P has mentioned this, but looking for an area of passion and really diving into it. Like if you've played violin your whole life, are you teaching little kids how to play violin? What are you doing with that skill that you've worked on for so long, and you really using that to parlay into something fantastic for your future? So those are some things to think about, but we're also getting some great suggestions in the in the questions. How can students get PE credit? I think this is a great question for Mr.
How can students get PE credit? Is that, is that it?
Yeah, Mr. Malaki, talk about what the requirements are at Lincoln for PE, maybe. This is not part of our college presentation, but that's okay. We'll answer this question. How can they get PE credit, and are waivers available at Lincoln? And if so, how do students qualify for them?
Yeah. So in order to graduate from Washington, a student needs to have 1.5 credits of PE. And so what that means is 3 semester courses worth of PE during a student's high school career. Now, if a student wants to waive 0.5 of those credits, a semester's worth, they'll need to make sure that they are a part of a coached sport or activity where a coach is watching them or supervising them. and that time needs to add up to 80 hours during a semester. So during in each semester's time, the first day of first semester to the 27th is the last day of the first semester this year. You would have had to have 80 hours of activity supervised by a coach, and if that's the case, you can apply for a PE waiver. And you can go to any of your counselor's Schoology page to find that PE waiver form. Oh, I forgot. If a student, I think the recent news came out that we're going to be having sports starting in February 22nd. And so you want to keep an ear out for that on what sports are available. But if you participate in a school sport, that's another way to earn enough hours to apply for a PE waiver.
Thank you, Mr. Milwaukee. And I also want to make the point that even if we don't compete and you play with a school sport this year, wink, wink, you actually would still qualify for a PE waiver, even if we don't go into competition. So, which is also, we are accepting PE waivers for second semester last year for our students who played tennis and other sports that they didn't actually get to go into competition. So I think we're just about through our questions. I don't, let's see, how can kids get PE? I think we're good, and it's 8:02, and we said we would be here till 8 o'clock. So in respect for everyone's time, including my amazing colleagues, I want to say thank you to all of you. I really appreciate everyone who's come out. I hope this was informative. I want to thank Katie Hall and her team for helping us get the word out and always being an advocate for Lincoln families. And I hope you enjoyed tonight. We will be downloading and compressing this video, and we'll hopefully have it posted by Thursday is the goal, but it could be Friday. I don't know if you know this about Lincoln, but one of our most tech savvy people on our staff is actually a student. So we have to make sure that he is available because he helps us out, because we like to put things on the student YouTube page also, and we let students handle that. So sometimes there's a little delay. So hopefully by Friday, but we'll definitely get that out. Thank you again, Mr. Milwaukee, Ms. Pacumpra. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, thanks everyone for being here. Thanks for your time. We miss you. Oh, Mr. Milwaukee, you're muted.
Second. Yeah, take care, everybody. Go Lynx.
Go Lynx. Have a good night. Thank you.